Season 40, Episode 8. How about we chat? The episode opens with an image of this scroll being unfolded by each of the folks on Edge of Extinction, and they're looking at what they can buy with their fire tokens. And we know that they're about to engage in a challenge that will determine who gets back in the game. Pretty exciting episode, don't you think? Gets me hyped up. I'm ready to figure out this tokens thing. What are they doing? And here's where the rubber meets the road from my perspective. You've got to decide what you have, how many tokens are available, and what you can buy. I think it was a good choice. Was it Natalie and Rob who bought immunities? I think it was 3 tokens. I think that's great. I think that's a good use of their tokens if they get back in the game. An advantage in the next challenge. Well, that's the challenge that's going to determine whether they can get in the game. And it's only 1 token? Oh, for crying out loud. Everybody should have bought that. Even rather than immunity thereafter. Because if you can't get in, obviously, what good is the immunity? Which leads me to kind of jump ahead a little bit to Tyson's choice of having decided to buy peanut butter with the 1 token he had last time, some time ago. And I got a number of comments from many of you saying, ha ha Hatch, you were all over Tyson for what now? What do you think? Because, jump the shark here. Tyson wins the challenge. Well, is it because of the peanut butter? Maybe. And maybe that was a good choice. I'm not, Mr. Knows Everything. I don't have a crystal ball. And if we were to know that the challenge was coming that quickly, that he needed that amount of energy, and that the peanut butter really was what gave it to him, then that would have been a good choice. But I stand by all of my comments with respect to how little we knew about what you might be able to buy with the tokens. And so it was a risk. Survivor's about a lot of risks. And we've got to give kudos to Tyson for having bought the peanut butter when he did. It worked out in his favor. Whether you think peanut butter matters or not isn't so important as whether or not Tyson felt it did. Even if it was psychological, that he felt he had an advantage because he had the energy from the peanut butter, it's an advantage. Somebody else was talking about perceptions in the game. Perceptions are almost everything. I think reality matters. I talk about it a lot and how what's true is important in real life. In Survivor, what you cause others to perceive about you might be way more important than what's true because it's a game. People are going to argue with me that could play out in real life too. But I've got plenty to say if you try that argument. So both Natalie and Rob buy an advantage in the challenge with their with 1 fire token, and then they each buy immunity with 3 additional fire tokens. And did you notice that they filled out those slips, what they were buying, kind of individually and on their own, so they didn't have to account to all the rest of the people for where they got their tokens and how many they had. I thought that was interesting.
Merge time. Ben talking about how that's the most exciting part of the game because this is when we really figure it out. I agree with him. Go.
So they're heading toward the beach with Probst waiting, and they wander in, and what does Probst say? Yeah, drop your buffs. Everybody looks forward to this point in the game. This is, as I've said many times, the point in the game when the rubber hits the road. Ben says something to that effect right then, and I'm like, yeah, go Ben. It's true. When merge happens, when the final merge takes place, it's really game on. By then, you have kind of dropped all of the hopeful, trusting little partnerships you've made along the way, and you've got to really figure out what is a pathway, what are the pathways you might take toward the end. It's no easy task, and there's lots happening. And so this is when your energy's a little depleted, you've been there for quite a while, this is when everything that you know about the game matters. This is when you've really got to adjust and adapt very, very quickly to a lot happening. And it's not until many of the folks who you're playing with are gone that it becomes a little bit more controllable. When you have fewer people and you have more of a sense of what each of them are planning, the game is a little bit more controllable if you're good. Right now, wow, it's like the Wild West, and it's really fun and exciting and exhausting beyond description. In some of these confessionals, I need to point out some of what is happening so that you can hear my perspective on who these players are. Let's look at Rob. You know, he's talking early in this episode about Edge of Extinction having been the hardest place he's ever been, the worst thing he's ever done. You know, that I have talked often about how Survivor is difficult and much, much harder. It looks difficult, and it's much, much harder than it looks. No question. And no question that Edge of Extinction would be psychologically challenging. You'd be lonely. It would be difficult food-wise. All of those things, I'm sure, are true. But I don't think that it's reasonable for the participants who are invested there, who are involved, who are playing, to wallow in that. And that's how it comes across to me when they share that and only that with the audience. When they talk about it's the worst place ever. No, the worst place ever, if you're a Survivor player and you are as dedicated and determined to win the game as I would want you to be at Winners in War, would be home. So Edge of Extinction gave you the opportunity to potentially get back in the game. You got to win fire tokens that might help you get back in. So it's tough for me to hear Rob talking about how just awful it is and just terrible and miserable and it's the worst place in the world. And I just find it a little bit exaggerated, a little bit emotionally outside the game, a little bit detached from the goal or what the goal ought to be. Do I understand the emotion of it? Do I understand that he has family at home and that his wife was out there for a long time before him too, and he's got to kind of deal with that? Absolutely. But it's those emotions, when unrestrained, when uncontrolled, that undermine good Survivor players' possibilities. And I feel like that could happen. I'm not sure. Actually, as the challenge plays out and Rob, it hangs on as long as he can and the whole bit of it. And when he sees Tyson win, you know, he isn't distraught. He doesn't overreact. He did handle that well. So I could be wrong again. You know, I'm wrong sometimes, rarely. Go with me here. But it felt to me as if there were more emotion in what Rob was saying about his time on Edge of Extinction than would be valuable to retain while playing the game. That's all. Thoughts for some of you who are really wondering what it feels like to be out there and what choices I might make differently. What'd you think of the challenge? So they're back from Edge of Extinction. They want to get back in and they go through the challenge. We know Tyson wins. It's amazing. It's kind of exciting, I thought, as he, or at least it's edited that way, as his ball gets to the top. Is it as close as it looked? I don't know, but it sure looked close. And even as close as it was, Rob didn't overreact. He didn't lose it. He didn't over-emotionally blow up. And everything was at stake there. You know, to go back to the Edge of Extinction when you've talked about how it was the worst place you've ever been and how horrible, That's got to be tough for Rob. And he held it together and he did well. I have to give him credit for that. I thought that was decent gameplay. To say to Tyson, good job, took something that I wasn't certain Rob even had. But he does. He did. And that's good. So the challenge ends. And Probst talks to the folks from Edge of Extinction, other than Tyson, because Tyson's set. He's back in the game, about what they're about to do. Go ahead back. He's sending them back to Edge of Extinction. But he notes that one of them will have an opportunity to come back in. There'll be another challenge that will determine who else will come back into the game to play. What's fascinating is that all of those people being sent to Edge of Extinction now will also participate at tribal councils as jury members. What does that mean? That means, for the first time, somebody who's on the jury watching tribal councils will get a chance to come back into the game. And for the first time, all of the people in the game will be either part of the jury or being voted to determine whether they're the winner. That's never happened. There's always been a smaller jury number, a smaller number of jury players, jury members, than the full cast. The entire cast, it appears, will act as the jury for who wins season 40. That's something. It'll be interesting. From my perspective, particularly those who were sent to Edge of Extinction first, second, third, fourth, that early, how much of the game did they personally observe? How much knowledge do they have of what's happening? Even though they'll sit on the jury at tribal councils post-merge, so they'll be able to see that interaction, does it matter that they've lacked any kind of first-hand observation of all of what it took to get to the merge? I think about that, and I wonder what impact that will have. It's a very, very different game from other survivors because of this. When I think about who to get rid of, and particularly in the very early days of the game, I don't have to be so concerned about what they might think of me or how I've gotten rid of them or how I've interacted with them. But if they are jury members, I would be an idiot not to be much, much, much more interested in how I'm interacting and how I'm causing them to feel about what I've done with them and who I am, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's Survivor. As you could probably ask Russell, who knows the game is all about interactions and what the jury really thinks. But it is. This changes things. And did these players in season 40 have any idea that the folks they were getting rid of were going to be on the jury? I don't know. I would hope so. If that were not made clear to them before they started the game, I don't think it's just a twist. I think it's unfair. And I think it undermines the game in an unnecessary way. And some of the twists have done that over the years. This would be awful to have just kind of out of the blue decided that all players will be on the jury without having warned the players in the game who got rid of these early players that they would eventually be jurors. Follow all of that? I hope so. It seems maybe now a kind of a subtle thing, but when you come down to numbers at the end, who wins, it could be really, really crucial how you interacted with some of those early players. The challenge is done. The Edge of Extinction folk wander on back and merge feast. Oh, do you see that spread? Seriously, I love it. I have no qualms with it. We didn't get it, but the merge feast grows like exponentially each season. It looked like there were every kind of food known to man. It just looked fantastic. The fresh fruit had me drooling, thinking about how you go for so many days without real nutrition when you're out there playing Survivor. So I was loving it. And I know you love Tony. I love Tony. God, he just makes me smile. And much of what he shares with us is just so sincere. It's just so right there, and he's just expressing, oh wait, who knew you needed to combine tokens to buy things? But the food looks good. Oh, but the merge food is free, and he's right in it. You get whatever's in his head. It comes out. He expresses it. You know what he's thinking. And you watch kind of almost like on the edge of your seat to see what else might come out or whether he's going to trip or goof up or have luck. Oh, it's fun to watch. If only I really understood, and I never will, how much of what Tony does is intentional. How much of how he presents himself among other players is actually intended. There's something so charming about him, so fun and open, that makes me want to hug him and play with him and just be there in the midst of all of that fun stuff. But as a Survivor aficionado, I wonder how much of it is serving him, how much of it is intended to be as kind of warm and likable as he comes off. If there is any amount that is intentional, kudos to you, because great job. If it's not intentional, great, it's who you are. I love you. It's wonderful. But unintentional is why it seems, if that's the case, is why it would seem so frenetic and why it could be so dangerous if it's not planned. The sign of great players is thoughtfulness, I think. And one of the things that we just see here now from Sarah after the merge is this comment about it looks like to her like a big bowl of spaghetti. So thinking about that, so here's the merge, and there are all these people now. No more teams, no more little pockets. Here's the merge. And you have all these participants kind of intertwined with personal relationships from prior to the game, with years of interacting at charity events, with knowledge of how each of them have played before, and with the personal experiences that have unfolded right now in season 40, all the way up to episode 8 that we're talking about now. All of that intertwined, I think a great analogy, as Sarah now saying, feels to her like a bowl of spaghetti, where you don't know when that noodle ends, where the other one's connected. It's a mess, and that's part of the excitement and the scariness, really, of being in Survivor as a competitor immediately post-merge. Kind of pulling those strands out one by one mentally and figuring out who's connected, how strongly, which ones could be to your advantage. That's not an easy thing to do, and it's essential if you're playing in any way other than, we'll see what happens, kind of with luck, which I hope not too many of these people are playing with. So we love Denise, right? Yeah, Denise, we saw, has this quiet, calm, focused game going on. But post-merge, sitting down, there's Denise explaining out loud how and why she got rid of Sandra and being honest about it. What's the problem with that? Oh, so many things. I think if she'd thought through better how that might impact other players, it would have been much, much brighter to withhold some of that reasoning and talk, maybe not even share about the two idols you had. That kind of communication where you're giving away not just how you planned it out, what you'd done to prepare, how you had those idols, how you were willing to use them without letting anybody else know. They give others the opportunity to see what a threat you are unnecessarily. I don't see it as much, if any, of an advantage to you personally, Denise, to share that information with everybody there. That information you could have picked and chosen much more carefully as you developed closer relationships with the others around you who might have then appreciated it as they were deciding how strongly to align with you. That's one of those subtleties that happen quickly in a game. And when you do that, poof, spill it. All of that information is no longer available for you to use in the ways that you think it might benefit you. It's out there. It's done. It's no longer yours. And it can be misused so easily. One person thinking you just exposed what a credible threat you are can spread that and exaggerate it, even beyond anything that's reasonable, and others will still wonder, yeah, we need to get rid of her. Dangerous. What did you think of the big threat, little threat conversation that Tony was involved in? Talking about how there are big threats out there, and there this one, the other one, but there are a bunch of little threats. And I wonder if having that kind of mindset where you've so, it seems, strongly or confidently categorized people as big and little threats does a disservice. I think it's much more effective to recognize that those who are still there after the merge and who are playing are threats, and even if they aren't appearing threatening, even if you think many of the others don't think of a particular player as a big threat, that in itself makes that person a threat of significance. You follow that? That's so I'm concerned about separating people into the big threat, little threat category. Other than to do that for your own strategic reasons, to kind of put that out there to make other people think that or buy into it, and let them vote out anybody but you, as Sandra would say. I get that, and that's okay. But if you are believing some of what you're saying, that's concerning to me. Oh, let's talk the physicality of this show. So you're sitting there, you're watching, you see the challenges, you see the merge, you see the Edge of Extinction players, and sometimes we get so wrapped up in the game and the players, and I do personally, kind of the memory of the mental exhaustion, that we start to forget about the physical locality, like where you are. And I hope you can just appreciate, who was it? I think it was Sophie, sitting there shaking, physically shaking like a leaf. And I'm telling you, that's not exaggerated. It is cold. I mean, this seems counterintuitive, but one of the things that I was able to do was to just think of it as taking a shower. I'd get naked and I'd be out on the beach, and the rain would be coming down, and it would be certainly colder water than I would want in a shower. But just walking the beach and thinking of it as getting a shower helped me somehow endure better than the folks who I was walking back and forth in front of on the beach. They were, maybe either sitting by the fire or kind of under a half-assed tarp, and I was watching them with their arms crossed and with they're just hunched over, and just the total shaking and kind of moaning, and I realized that the sitting there, kind of allowing yourself to live in and feel the actual physical coldness of the monsoonish type rains doesn't serve you. So getting out and being weird and, just, okay, I'm going to get naked, I'm going to be on the beach, I'm going to shower. It felt better. It was energy. Maybe it was the physicality of kind of walking back and forth and warming up my body. Maybe it was thinking of it as a shower that I needed. I wanted to feel fresher and get the salt and the salt water off of me. But those are the things that I did. Some of what I did that enabled me to mentally get through the game a lot healthier, a lot longer. When I watched Sophie last night shaking the way she was, I know she was doing all she could to manage in the moment, but I felt for her, because I know that kind of physical discomfort is really, really difficult to bear. And somebody was saying something about, what would these survivors forget this was Survivor? It's hard not to be threatened and challenged and emotionally kind of undermined by that kind of physical discomfort. And I'm hoping viewers recognize that. Last night we saw a little bit of that. We see very little of that struggle, I think, in recent years in Survivor. Some scenes here and there, but in the early years, I think watching what we endured helped viewers understand the mental place in which we lived so often. And that connected them, I think, a little bit better with our mindsets and where we were coming from when we made decisions or made errors in our decision making. It's still a part of the process. They're still out there 39 days, and I don't care whether they got the biggest merge feast, the most beautiful. They're still suffering in ways that I don't think viewers really could grasp, because I don't think they can maintain long enough how difficult it really is in the midst of the choices that they're making. It's a fun part of the game. Fun. I know I'm weird. It's fun for me to think about how much that physical challenging part of the game impacts the game and impacts your planning. All that said about the difficulty and the actual suffering that's going on, who doesn't love a player, in this case Ben, pointing out that Sophie is crying and cold and frigid, and instead of feeling this kind of warmth and wanting to go over and put his arm around her and help her warm up, he thinks and says with the smile you can hear in his voice, "She'll go quickly." I love it. This is a man, and I'm not just pointing it out because he's adorable, he is, but this is a man focused on the game. That kind of thought, when your normal human reaction, I think, ought to be consoling and helpful and, hey, how about take my shirt or whatever. She'll go quick. Oh, for me, that just, rockets me back into the game, and I got to give kudos to somebody thinking that way. Yes, it's awful. But they've all got to go. They've all got to get their throats slit. That's part of the game. Bye-bye, bye-bye. And every time you see someone suffering a little bit more than you, if you're a good Survivor player, you've got to think about how that can benefit you. And I love that he didn't share that with the cast. Obviously, he's not going to be perceived, he doesn't want to be perceived as a cold bastard, but he shared that with the viewers, which makes me appreciate the gameplay that's behind a mindset that would say something like that. I hope you caught that in real time, because it was a fun moment. It shook me out of my concern for Sophie, who was literally crying. She was so cold. So Jeff starts explaining the next challenge, and the winner from among the women and the winner from among the men each get a fire token and immunity. That's nice, because these types of challenges, these particularly that talk about, that require you to hold up your entire body weight, that require you to expend every bit of muscular energy to, in this case, hold on to a pole, to insert, one toe maybe into a tiny crevice and try desperately to support all of your weight, definitely benefit the petite individuals. The tiniest guy and the tiniest woman definitely are at an advantage. Yeah, they have to support their whole body weight, but if their body weight is so significantly less than some of the big beasts like me, they're going to last longer. It's just physics. And so separating men and women at least does help give some semblance of a balance. It gives the guys an opportunity to have something out of the challenge. Gives them a reason to stay in it. I mean, a big guy like me, if it weren't for how it might be perceived by other players, would just walk up and jump off. Because I couldn't. It's not possible for me to outlast one of the more petite women. They just need to stay on for a little while, and there's just no way I could have held all of my body weight up on that pole for that long. But it is an exciting challenge to me. I do like watching to see who can, really force themselves to hang in there. And it was, I don't know, I think it seemed to me I could sense the energy being put into winning, from Jeremy, for example. The way in which he was not giving up, and the way in which he looked over at Adam. Did you love it? He was not playing. I think Jeremy recognized, as a good player would, that it's important to have a certain sense of confidence, safety that the immunity idol gives you when you just merge. Because that is, as I said earlier, when everything's all asunder. Everything's upside down and inside out, and anything could go in any particular direction. So it's a really satisfying time in the game to have an immunity. And I could just see in Jeremy's eyes how much he wanted it. But physically, he just was not even thinking about letting up on that pole until he just had literally nothing left in him. Good for him. Good for him. And Denise pulls it out for the women. So that's great, because again, same reason as for Jeremy here right after the merge. What a good time. When Denise exposed herself as the powerful player that she is, to have now the confidence in an immunity idol, that's nice. That gives her a few days here now, a couple of days of peace, of restfulness that you don't get often in Survivor, where she can relax in the knowledge she's not going home and begin to assess how to move forward. Good for her, good for Jeremy, onward. Adding to Jeremy's win, he says, with kind of, I don't know, a little bit of glee, I want to drive this thing. I'm ready to drive this thing, but I don't want anybody to know I'm driving. Good for him. Good for him. That's good gameplay. That's good thoughtfulness. Here he is, just as I said about Denise, here he is, he's won the immunity, and now he has time to plot, to kind of plan to move forward, because he can relax a little bit knowing that he's not going out in this tribal council. Here's another look at perception in Survivor. How fun was it? How funny did it look to you as they showed us Nick, what they called butting in to conversations? And the edit was like Nick walking up to this group of women, Nick walking into another conversation, Nick kind of slowly, kind of almost sliding into another conversation, over and over and over. It's all about perception. Who wouldn't, if you're playing Survivor, wander in to hear what people were talking about and to learn as much as you could about what their perspectives are? Who wouldn't want to do that? But if the editors then show you doing that time after time after time, and put it next to the comments of others calling it butting in, suggesting that they've noticed Nick doing this often, whether they think that or not, maybe they're just saying that to help others think of Nick as a butter-inner, and giving a kind of focus on him as somebody you can think about getting rid of. Good for them. But it's interesting to me how that's what becomes important. Like, everybody wants to listen to what people are talking about. Everybody would naturally walk up if they could to hear or to engage or to build relationships with the people who are talking. But if someone else uses that and kind of points out that you're doing that in a way that's, perceived as negative, butting in is not something people think of as a positive thing to do, then there's a target that slides toward you, potentially. And I think that's what was going on last night. Funny footage of the, one butt-in after another of Nick. Good for him. Not good that he was perceived as butting in by others, or that somebody used that. It would be better if he'd wandered up without people noticing that. Okay, as the conversations begin and start to happen, start to multiply really, with respect to who's going to be voted out, who needs to go, Wendell and Adam seem to keep coming up. I want to point out more brilliant gameplay by Denise. These things I call brilliant are often very, very subtle. And if you aren't paying attention to the particular scene and what's actually happening, what are the dynamics of the individuals in that scene, you might even miss it. Denise reacted to Jeremy's suggestion that Adam be the one voted off without any discernible discomfort. Just this smooth willingness to be partnered with Jeremy in whatever he decides, and pointing out for him that it's not something you're doing or pretending you're going to do. Like, I know, she says to Jeremy, that you might have thought I'd have a reaction to that. I know you might have thought I would be opposed to it. Listen, I'm happy to head in whatever direction makes most sense. Let's do it. Now, clearly, personally, it would have been better for Denise if she'd retained someone with whom she'd been close for a while. But her willingness to just go along with Jeremy, that's the kind of Survivor gameplay that I think people miss sometimes, and by missing it, then aren't able to credit those players who are applying it, who are playing that way. It's a very, very important part of really great gameplay, is to be perceived as aligned with whatever makes most sense in the midst of the conversation, and saving your emotional reaction and evaluation for what choices you will actually make for when that other person with whom you're engaged is gone. Not many people can do that well or consistently. Denise does it beautifully. In contrast with what I just talked about with respect to Denise, how about Adam? So Adam's sharing his reaction to Ben. And Adam's asking Ben certain things, and Ben's like, I don't know. And Adam's frustration with Ben's reaction is so obvious. It's, just answer me. That kind of emotional attachment or investment to the response you wanted as opposed to the response you got is subtly less effective Survivor gameplay. Yeah, I know some of you might make an argument that, well, he didn't show it so badly to Ben, or he didn't really give away all of how badly frustrated he was with that reaction. Well, maybe not. But the flip side of a player who does it well is when Denise not only didn't give away any of the frustration, but smoothly presented as if not only was she comfortable, but happy to participate with Jeremy in whatever mode, whatever decisions were made moving forward. That's the difference. Leaving the opportunity for Ben to think that Adam's reaction was frustration and negativity, because it was, enables Ben to continue in his just get rid of Adam mode and communicate that to other players. Not good.
You could see how it would Is it a defining thing? Is it a defining vote, Jeff asks. Wendell says, it'll tell some things. Yeah, it is a difficult balance.
In the tribal council, it's great when Jeff asks Wendell if this vote will be a defining one. Well, you could have asked anyone, and he probably did ask others, but that's the edit we see. And Wendell saying, well, yeah, I think it will expose some things. Yeah, every vote in tribal council exposes some things, but what's it going to expose? Clearly Wendell had no sense that he was going, and the idea that he got voted out shows how much gameplay was going on. But even more evidence of the gameplay involved was Nick and Michelle not having had any idea that Wendell actually was the one going. And interestingly, Wendell gives his fire token, once voted off, he has two of them, one to Nick and one to Michelle. So he wasn't misunderstanding what took place. Somehow, Wendell wasn't frustrated that Wendell wasn't frustrated that Michelle or Nick might have undermined him. Somehow he was confident enough that they didn't, or at least willing to give them tokens anyway. Maybe because he thought if they were involved, they would have had to be. Who knows? But that was interesting for me to watch Wendell not know he was going, Wendell get voted off, and then Wendell give his fire tokens to Nick and to Michelle. I wondered about that. The way he treated Michelle over time had me thinking she wasn't going to get, in those circumstances, she wasn't going to get any tokens from Wendell. But she did. Good for her. And good for Wendell.
Go, Sophie, go. She feels like the hardest thing on Survivor is being okay with not being neurotically involved in every conversation.
I loved Sophie's comments too, just to make a point of it, about how, particularly in this whole period, this episode, when the merge happened, and all kinds of those spaghetti attachments are unraveling, it's difficult to not be involved in as many or all of the conversations that are happening. And that's what happened when Nick was perceived as butting in. But I love that Sophie points out that some of what she's come to grips with is learning that you've got to learn to be comfortable. You've got to accept a certain level of comfort with not being privy to all of the conversations. And therein, or at the same time, also kind of just observing so that you can get a sense of what you might have missed and get a sense of what's actually taking place. That may be more important than running around and making sure that you've heard every word that's said, because the truth is you never will. You'll never hear all of every word that's said, and there's a certain importance, really, to your ability to relax in knowing that you won't hear everything, and being calm and productive in your planning for what steps to take next, even if you haven't heard every bit of what everyone has said. Sometimes tough to do, especially if you're a control freak. Tony was good at Tribal Council too, talking to Jeff about the ocean and the current, and that there are times, it's just good to go with the current, Jeff. That's true. And Tony does do that. He may be flailing a bit about to stay afloat, but he does let the current kind of direct where things are headed. And that's good. That can be really good gameplay. It's even better gameplay to comment that way about what's necessary in the game at Tribal to Jeff. And in response to Probst's probes, probing you, while at the same time not using specific names, not offending anybody. And so I've got to assume that's intentional. Tony and many people who made their comments talked little about who they were talking about, just talked in general terms. We're watching Winners at War. We're watching people who have the basics, who get how to play the game, and hopefully are sufficiently skilled to play it better and better and better. Certainly better than they did the last time that they won. And I'm liking it. How about how little footage in this episode we saw of folks searching for idols? In the time that everybody merged and they went back for the feast, the feast ought to be a focus, no question. But we didn't see anybody wander off or talk about wandering off or even share in a confessional that they wanted to wander off for an idol. If it's the same as it has always been since idols were introduced, there are idols available once there is a merge, once an idol's been played or whatever. So I don't know. Aren't there idol? Shouldn't there be an idol out there somewhere? I guess I'm not certain of that, but I think so. And I'm wondering why we saw nothing about anybody searching for an idol this episode or some kind of advantage at the feast. This idea of just kind of going with the flow and, you know, involving yourself in the feast, etc. That's all great for the game and for how you want to be perceived. But I'm hoping the people were looking for an advantage while at the merge feast, looking for idols if there are some available out there. And we saw nothing of that this episode. I thought that was interesting. Episode 8. Fun episode, right? Lots happened. There were many things that happened in the episode. It was a kind of a turning point now that people have merged. Tyson's back in the game. But it also, I hope, helped you decide who really is playing well and better than you might have expected or worse than you might have expected. Who are you ready to see weeded out now? This is the time I start thinking about that kind of stuff, that I want to enjoy watching really great gameplay start to unfold. And I hope that those who are playing as well as I'm perceiving them to be playing get to stay and don't get undermined, so I can see them continue to play the way they're playing. I don't know. On we go. Woof. Good Survivor episode. You know, 80% of you who are listening to these videos have not subscribed to my channel. Please subscribe. Just hit the subscription button and hit the notification button, and you'll be informed when I have another video up for you to listen to. After you've subscribed, comment. Comment positively. Comment negatively. No holds barred. Just say what you're thinking. That's what will make our exchange even more valuable. As I'm able, I'll create new videos responsive to that commentary. So like away, or dislike, on that rare occasion you may feel the need to do so. But either way, thank you.